Pretend you need to use the restroom and escape.
Under the table, my brother, Patrick, nudged my foot with his smartphone, secretly showing me the screen. It seemed he wanted to get me out of this situation. 3 years into our marriage, I finally got to introduce my brother Patrick to my husband Randolph. However, Patrick's face clouded within seconds of meeting Randolph, and he rudely ignored the conversation to stuff his face with the snacks in front of him.
That cake looks delicious. Riley, why don't you go to the restroom for a bit?
Wait, what are you planning to do with my cake? One piece didn't seem enough. I'm a bit hungry. Can we talk after I eat this? Patrick, being a detective, wasn't one to do things without reason. There must be a purpose behind Patrick's actions, but I couldn't grasp it. I headed to the restroom to gather my thoughts. After considering, I decided not to run away and returned to the living room. When I sat next to Patrick, he gave me a furious look as if to say, "Why did you come back?" I had taken some precautions, so I hoped he wouldn't be too angry. It seemed those precautions worked, as the doorbell rang after a while. When I checked the monitor, I finally understood his intentions. Randolph was apparently a terrible person. In that case, in this situation, Randolph would be facing severe consequences. I am Riley. I'm 35 years old and work in sales. I married my husband Randolph 3 years ago, and we don't have children yet. I also have a younger brother named Patrick, whom I haven't seen in a while. He didn't run away from home or have any complicated family issues, it was because of work. Patrick works as a cop on a small, sparsely populated island. Normally, cops on the island work in shifts of 2 or 3 to cover 24 hours, but he is the only cop there. That's why he can't come home often. Patrick became a cop partly because our dad was one, but also because he always had a strong sense of justice. When I was in 8th grade and Patrick was in 6th grade, we once witnessed a man shoplifting bread and drinks at a grocery store.
Hey, he's putting it inside his clothes. I'm going to warn him.
Wait. Didn't Dad say you should catch shoplifters only after they've left the store without paying? Otherwise, they might say they were going to pay at the register.
Patrick was about to confront the shoplifter, but I grabbed his arm to stop him. I felt like a police officer ready to catch the shoplifter, fully immersed in the role. He seemed to feel the same, breathing excitedly. While we watched, trying not to be noticed, the man walked past the register and out of the store. Patrick and I ran after him.
Excuse me. What?
We caught up to him a little distance from the store, and Patrick called out to him. The man stopped and turned to look at us. It was then I realized how dangerous what we were doing could be. As we got closer, the man looked bigger than I had thought, and I began to worry, is it safe for us middle schoolers to confront a shoplifter? I felt the sense of being a police officer fall away, leaving me just a trembling middle schooler.
Can you tell me the way to the nearest bus stop? Oh, I'll talk to him. Riley, you go to the restroom.
Don't embarrass me in front of people. Fine, I'll go. Patrick, quick thinking as always, saved me from my trembling fear. I fought the urge to run and instead slowly made my way to the grocery store restroom, pretending that was my destination. Once inside the grocery store, I reported the situation to an employee. One male staff member went to Patrick and the others, while another listened to my story and quickly checked the surveillance camera recordings. Just as I described, the camera clearly showed the theft, with the shoplifter failing to pass items through the register. Once confirmed, I went back to Patrick with the male employee. When we arrived, the shoplifter was shouting loudly. It seemed he realized he was caught when the employee arrived, and he was making a last-ditch effort.
The camera caught the moment of the theft. Could you come to the office and discuss it with us?
Upon hearing about the evidence, the shoplifter, realizing he was caught, obediently followed the male employee back into the store. Afterward, the staff thanked me, but I never found out what happened to the shoplifter. On the way home, Patrick apologized to me. "I'm sorry. That was dangerous. If the employee hadn't come, we might have been attacked by the shoplifter and he could have gotten away.
It was my fault. Acting like a cop. It was thoughtless of me. I'm sorry."
Until we got home, Patrick and I didn't speak at all. That night, our dad scolded us severely after hearing the story. In situations like that, get an adult to call the police. You never know what a criminal might do. Never do something so dangerous again. Patrick and I shrank as we listened to Dad's very reasonable lecture. I secretly think this was the event that inspired Patrick to pursue a career in law enforcement. Patrick probably wanted to be able to catch bad people himself. He not only has a strong sense of justice, but also a personality that cannot leave people in trouble alone. Wow, people live on such small islands too. If they're struggling without doctors, they might be struggling without police too. One day, Patrick was watching a documentary about a doctor who moved to a remote island to help its residents. Inspired by this program, middle school he set a goal to become a police officer who would protect the peace of such islands. He did indeed become a cop and now works on a remote island. Achieving his goal, he takes great pride in his work. However, he prioritizes his job too much, often neglecting his family, which is a small flaw of his. He says, "If I leave the island, I won't be able to respond if something happens," and he has stopped coming home, only contacting us occasionally. I think it's been 5 or 6 years since I last saw him. Nonetheless, my parents and I are proud of Patrick for working for the people, so we accept it. However, I really wanted him to be there for my wedding. I got married 3 years ago. We met in the most ordinary way, through a mutual acquaintance. Randolph is serious, works in sales, and is highly successful. He's already being given significant responsibilities with great expectations for his future. I also work in sales, but his achievements are far beyond mine. I wanted to boast about my wonderful husband Randolph to Patrick, but since he couldn't attend the wedding, I ended up just sending a photo. Normally, I'd be furious at him for not attending his sister's wedding, but Patrick had unavoidable circumstances at that time. Apparently, the day before the wedding, there was a report that a drunken assault suspect had fled to the island where he was stationed. Under such circumstances, he couldn't possibly leave the island. The suspect was later caught, and he called to apologize. "Riley, I'm sorry. I intended to come, but I just couldn't leave the island." "It's okay. You never come back, but someday you will, right? I'll introduce you to Randolph then. Or maybe we should come to the island." "Oh, come on, don't do that. I don't want to disrupt your newlywed life, and if I bring Randolph to a place like this, Riley might get mad at me for taking him to such a remote place." He's not that kind of person. In the end, the suggestion to visit was declined, and Patrick meeting Randolph was postponed to someday. I decided to enjoy my newlywed life, taking his words to heart. However, my married life gradually turned out to be different from what I had imagined. When I started living with Randolph after getting married, I expected a sweet newlywed life. But Randolph prioritized work, and our newlywed life turned out to be different from what I had envisioned.
"So, I'm going to bed first."
"Okay, good night." Leaving Randolph in the living room reading a book, I headed to the bedroom alone. Randolph would come home from work, have dinner, take a shower, and then work on his materials or read business books until late at night. At this time, there was an overwhelming aura of "don't talk to me." It was as if there was an invisible wall around Randolph. On weekends, he would go out for dinner with clients in the evening or play futsal or golf early in the morning. On days when he went fishing, he would leave early in the morning and come back late at night. Meeting outside of work helps build trust quickly. As a salesperson, you should be aware of that. The key, he said, was not to talk about work. I understood that his success at work was built on hard work. He would work or study tirelessly, even on weekends. During Thanksgiving or Christmas, he would be delighted to secure uninterrupted time to study. As a result, although I wanted to visit our families with Randolph occasionally, it never happened. It's good to work hard. I heard some wives complain about their husbands not working at all. Compared to their problems, my complaint about Randolph being too dedicated to his work might be a luxury. But since we were newlyweds, I wanted him to spend a little more time with me. Having gotten married, I wanted to have children, but Randolph said, if we have a child now, it will affect my work, and continued to avoid it. When I brought up the topic of children, it made me seem desperate, as if I was craving them. Moreover, Randolph, always tired from work, would handle things in a rather perfunctory manner. Are we really a married couple? I began to question while looking at the ring on my left hand. He seemed to be the type not to feed the fish he caught. Before marriage, I thought he was kind, but my impression of Randolph changed significantly after getting married. Since the newlywed period is unique to this time, my dissatisfaction with his gradually grew. However, since Randolph was just working hard, I didn't want to be that annoying woman who says, "What's more important, your work or me?" So, I tried subtly to see if Randolph truly cared about me.
There was a molestation incident around here. Should I be more careful when coming home?
You're over 30 now, so you don't need to worry. Randolph's words made me feel uneasy. I should probably be more worried than I thought. I decided to express my feelings a bit more clearly. You always seem to be working, even when you're at home. But isn't that taking a toll on your body? Maybe you should rest sometimes. I mean, we're newlyweds. Shouldn't we try to have more of a married life? I'm in my mid-30s now, and I'll be in my 40s before I know it. Now is the time to push myself at work. I have to become the sales manager. I don't want to just be a cog in the sales department. I want to be the one running the whole show, making the entire team excel. It's frustrating when people think anyone can do sales. Sure, engineers, lawyers, doctors, they do jobs that not everyone can do, but that doesn't mean sales should be looked down upon. Randolph, who usually stays quiet at home, absorbed in making reports or reading books, was unusually talkative. Our work challenges were on different levels. While I struggled with monthly sales targets, Randolph had grander ambitions. I found myself unable to say anything to him. I began to think, maybe supporting Randolph is the right thing to do. So, I started to make sure not to disturb him while he studied at home. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to prepare breakfast and get Randolph ready when he had early morning fishing or golf outings. A year into our marriage, after dedicating myself to supporting Randolph's work. Hey, isn't dinner ready yet? I expect it to be ready when I get home. I'm sorry. I got home a little late because of work. You don't have a demanding job. If you're late, it's because you're not competent enough. You need to work harder. It's not that. It's just a busy season. People who can't handle their job always blame others. If you can't do housework because of your job, then quit. We don't have kids yet, so we can live on my salary. Randolph had turned into a domineering husband. He would get angry if dinner wasn't ready when he got home. He would get upset if I took a shower or went to bed before he got home late. No matter how early he needed to get up for fishing or golf, if I didn't wake up first and prepare breakfast, he would get mad. And he belittled me, saying I was bad at my job, despite never seeing my work directly or being my boss. Sure, compared to him, who was hardworking and talented, I might seem less competent. But I was doing my best and considered myself average. If you want to talk back, prove yourself with results at work. These words made me feel inferior to Randolph, and I couldn't respond. If people saw my pathetic state, they would say, "This is moral harassment. You should stand up for yourself, or I couldn't endure this. I'd get a divorce." But he wasn't always cruel. He could be kind at times.
Welcome home. You're back early today.
Yeah.
Today's fishing trip wasn't too far. Look, I caught a bass. Dinner isn't ready yet, right? I'll handle it. You take a break for a change.
Randolph opened the fridge to see what he could cook besides fish. Tonight, I could relax on the sofa and wait for dinner to be ready. Moments like these made it impossible for me to dislike Randolph. Watching kind Randolph from behind, I thought, Randolph is just tough on work. He's working hard, and it's wrong of me to complain. Another year passed just like that, and our second year of marriage came to an end. Our third year of married life began. One day, after Randolph left as usual and I was alone at home, I sat on the sofa and reflected on the past 2 years and a bit of our married life. It's strange. There are no memories. The only thing that comes to mind is me doing housework for Randolph while working. As for good memories, the only ones that barely come to mind are our wedding, honeymoon, and the excitement I felt when we moved into this house and started our newlywed life. I realized that while I had been accumulating dissatisfaction with Randolph, I had been deceiving myself by thinking, this is something that can't be helped, this is something I should endure. Realizing this made me disillusioned with Randolph. But since we're married, it's not something that can be simply resolved with a goodbye. I shouldn't rush to a conclusion, but rather start by facing Randolph and my own feelings. I began to seriously think about the future, and it felt as if the part of me that had drifted away was coming back. The next day, out of the blue, I got a call from Patrick after a long time.
Patrick, it's been a long time. Almost 100 years, right?
A bit over 2 years. Actually, I'm moving back there.
Moving back? You mean leaving the island?
Yes, a new officer is coming, so I have to move back, and I'll be transferring from the community section to the detective section.
Really? So you'll be a detective like Dad?
Well, at first it'll probably be all grunt work. And since I'm moving back, introduce me to Randolph. Randolph. Huh. Since I was thinking a lot about Randolph at that time, my subtle reaction must have been noticeable over the phone. It's not like right away. I'll be busy with work for a while after moving back, so it'll be a bit later. That's not the point.
What's wrong? Did something happen?
As if to confirm my current situation and feelings, I explained to Patrick about the past 2 years and a bit of my married life. Since I hadn't talked to anyone about my marital problems with Randolph, including feeling belittled at work and having a domineering husband, my dissatisfaction with Randolph flowed out surprisingly smoothly. After listening to my story, Patrick gave me some very police-like advice.
Isn't that moral harassment?
I thought you'd say that. But he's kind sometimes, too.
That's a typical case of a woman who can't leave a guy who does moral harassment or DV. It's like you're in a brainwashed state with a mix of rewards and punishments.
But every time Patrick gave me advice, I countered with but after but. At this point, I was likely already in the brainwashed state Patrick described. Even understanding that, my but didn't stop. In the end, it's up to Riley to decide what to do. If you don't want to leave, that's your freedom too. After talking a lot about Randolph with Patrick, he handed down an extreme conclusion. I regretted being so annoying with my but after but. But, if I think about it, I don't have to come to a conclusion right now. Meet him once. Then let me know what you think.
Got it.
Patrick replied, sounding a bit annoyed. Knowing I was being an annoying sister, I felt sorry. That night, I told Randolph that Patrick was coming over.
My brother is coming to our house next time. We've been married for 3 years, but you've never met him, right?
What? Isn't he a cop just like Scott?
Yes, he is. And he's about to become a detective soon. Is home not okay? Would it be better outside?
No, home is fine. So, when is he coming?
He said that even when he gets back here, he'll be too busy with work to settle down for a while, so it'll probably be more than a month.
Randolph seemed nervous about meeting Patrick for the first time. I was also feeling a bit anxious, remembering the time I introduced Randolph to my family when we got married. A month later, Patrick came to our house.
This is Randolph. Nice to meet you.
Likewise, nice to meet you. I apologize for the delay in introducing myself. When I led Patrick into the living room, Randolph stood up from the sofa to greet him. Patrick returned Randolph's greeting, but his expression darkened when I introduced them, and he froze for a moment at the living room entrance. I panicked, wondering if Patrick had judged Randolph to be a useless man within 2 seconds of meeting him. However, after another 2 seconds, Patrick's expression was filled with the same sense of justice he had when he confronted a shoplifter back in middle school. Patrick's expression concerned me, but after confirming that they had finished their brief greetings, I guided Patrick to the living room table. Patrick sat next to me, with Randolph sitting across from him. I had already prepared tea and snacks for everyone at the table.
That cherry pie looks delicious.
Riley, why don't you go to the restroom for a bit?
Hey, what are you planning to do with my cherry pie?
One piece doesn't seem enough. I'm a bit hungry. Can we talk after I eat this? Sorry about that.
He likes cherry pie, so I prepared it, but that might have been a mistake. It's good he's not a difficult person.
Patrick smiled innocently like a child, prioritizing the cherry pie over his conversation with Randolph. I thought to myself, even if he's family, isn't this behavior rude for a first meeting, while showing a slightly displeased expression? At the same time, I wondered, Patrick wasn't such an ill-mannered person before, and tilted my head in confusion. There must have been some reason behind Patrick's words. However, not understanding it, I tilted my head even more. Patrick glanced at me as my head tilted more, then under the table, he opened a messaging app on his smartphone and started typing at an incredible speed. When the text was ready, he nudged my leg with his smartphone under the table and secretly showed it to me.
Pretend to go to the restroom and leave.
Patrick seemed to want to get me out of there. I understood his intent, but not the reason. However, I knew that Patrick, being a detective, wouldn't do something meaningless in such a situation.
You know, when you said earlier, go to the restroom, you really made me feel like I needed to go.
I left the living room and headed to the restroom, thinking about what Patrick was trying to do, whether I should leave the house instead of returning to the living room, and many other things. If Patrick told me to leave, does that mean there's a potential danger to me? But then, does that mean Randolph is dangerous? Could that be? If Randolph were dangerous, would it be okay to leave him alone with Patrick? If Patrick wanted to talk to Randolph, Wouldn't it be better for me to be there since I know more about Randolph? Although Patrick told me to leave, I decided to return to the living room.
It took you long enough. It's rude to keep Patrick waiting, you know?
Isn't it ruder that Patrick suddenly started eating the cake? And Randolph, it's not polite to say a woman takes too long in the restroom. When I returned to the living room, Patrick looked at me with surprise in his eyes. As I sat down next to Patrick again, he gave me an angry look, asking with his eyes, "Why did you come back?" I hoped he wouldn't be too angry since I had taken some precautions. Besides, if he kept that expression, whatever Patrick was planning might be sensed by Randolph.
The phone's ringing.
Huh? Oh. I'll take it outside.
His phone rang at the perfect timing, giving me an opportunity to get him out of the living room. Once he stepped out, he would be able to regain his composure. "I'm really sorry about my brother's manners."
I thought he'd be more serious since he's a cop.
Just because he's a cop doesn't mean he's always serious in his private life. While I made some harmless small talk to fill the time, Patrick came back looking much calmer. He seemed to have regained his composure.
We once caught a shoplifter together, Riley and I. Handling that at such a young age.
Even after Patrick came back, the small talk continued. It was surprisingly normal and uneventful. Dad got really mad at us back then. Since Patrick kept the conversation going, I joined in. But I was worried, unsure if this was the right move since I didn't understand Patrick's intentions. Minutes passed with nothing happening. As my anxiety grew, the doorbell suddenly rang. When I checked the monitor to see who it was, I finally understood Patrick's plan. Patrick checked the monitor and then looked at me, signaling with his eyes.
It looks like they've arrived. Come with me. What?
Just come on. There are things I need to confirm.
Randolph, looking puzzled, tilted his head as he followed us to the front door.
Who are you?
When Randolph opened the door, his confusion only deepened, and he tilted his head even more. Outside, there were 2 men and a car. I had a good idea of who these men were.
Aren't these guys detectives?
Detectives? But they're not in uniform.
Detectives aren't the same as police officers. They often wear plain clothes.
Oh, really? But why are detectives here?
When I revealed that the men were detectives, Randolph's expression shifted from confusion to shock. I could see beads of sweat forming on his forehead. I still didn't know why the detectives were here, but I could explain why I had called them.
I called the police station. Patrick secretly told me to pretend to go to the restroom and escape. So, I thought it was an emergency.
When you came back, I was surprised. I was planning to question Randolph after Riley left the house. There was a chance he might get violent.
There's no way I could understand all that from pretend to go to the restroom and escape. That's why I called the police. When we caught that shoplifter in middle school, Dad told us to contact an adult or the police in an emergency. So, I told them my detective brother told me to escape.
After that, I got a call from the police station to confirm. I asked them to send a few officers.
Oh, so that call was from the police station.
Patrick and I solved one question after another. However, the most important question remained unanswered. Just as I was about to ask, Randolph, who had been ignored, interrupted.
Don't you dare make decisions behind my back. How did you figure out I was a criminal?
The moment the detectives showed up at our door, I had a hunch that Randolph had done something wrong. However, the real question was, what did he have done? I stayed silent, intently listening to the conversation between Patrick and Randolph to uncover the answer.
I just got back to this area recently and was getting updated on the local incidents. Among them, there was a series of sexual assaults believed to be committed by the same person. These incidents occurred in two places. One was a bit away from this house. The other was near the place where Randolph lived before he got married. I learned about Randolph's previous residence from a call with Riley. Strangely enough, the sexual assaults in the area where Randolph used to live suddenly stopped around the time he got married and moved.
No way! Sexual assaults? I felt the blood drain from my face at this shocking revelation. That could just be a coincidence, right?
The sketch made from the victims' descriptions looks exactly like Randolph. Not only that, but the physical characteristics also match perfectly. Riley sent me photos from their wedding, but it didn't click until I saw Randolph in person. It's one of those things where you need to see the actual face to realize it. I also sent those photos to my colleagues at the station. Because of those photos, we quickly decided that it was necessary to talk to Randolph, which is why the detectives are here now.
Am I going to be arrested?
It's hard to say right now. We need to take you to the station for questioning, and then we'll see where things stand.
With 3 detectives standing right there, Randolph must have realized that resisting was pointless. He quietly went with the officers to the police station. I'm sorry this happened so suddenly. As a detective, I couldn't overlook this.
I understand, Patrick. Both you and Dad are detectives, so I know how things work. Even though it's a shock that Randolph committed these crimes, you separated me from someone who was hiding such awful things.
Ideally, a wife should believe in her husband's innocence. However, with them both being police officers, I knew what it meant when the police took someone away. So, that's what it is. There are still many things I don't understand, but we'll figure out the details as we go along. I took Patrick inside and had him explain what would happen next. The next day, I received a call informing me that Randolph had been arrested. Randolph had been going out for dinners and early morning fishing or golf trips to build relationships with clients. While he did go out with clients sometimes, it seems he was also lying to me and committing sexual crimes. He would hide behind cars and jump out naked in front of women walking late at night, or touch high school girls' chests as he passed by them. There were other things I can't even speak about, and it seems he even committed burglary. There were over 30 known victims. He was a habitual offender, and it's believed there are still more undiscovered crimes. I never imagined that the culprit of the molestation incidents in our neighborhood was my husband. The fact that he treated our intimate moments like a chore now made sense. He was fulfilling his desires through these crimes. I also understood why he avoided visiting my family and acted strange when Patrick said he was coming over. However, it was also true that Randolph worked seriously and achieved results at his job. Additionally, though it's embarrassing to say, he had me as his wife even without committing those crimes. I asked Patrick why Randolph continued to commit sexual crimes.
Sex crimes aren't always about sexual desire. Many people commit them to satisfy a need for control.
Control. Now that you mention it, he did want to be in a higher position at work and act like a domineering husband. He certainly had a strong desire for control. But how does that connect to sexual crimes?
By causing pain to their victims, they feel like they're controlling them. Also, since they don't physically injure or steal from the victims, some don't feel guilty, making it easier for them to become repeat offenders.
They're seriously hurting the victims.
Yeah, that's how we see it. But some people don't think that way. They might think, at least it's not physical violence. Plus, they understand it's a crime, so they get a thrill from thinking they're clever for not getting caught.
So, it's more about experiencing a thrill than satisfying sexual desire. I've heard that shoplifters often steal not for the items, but for the thrill. The psychology of criminals is quite complicated.
That thrill is problematic because it can become addictive, increasing the frequency of their crimes.
But I can't believe he would do such things.
That's exactly it. People with a desire for control often have high abilities or leadership roles that allow them to control others to some extent. They can be seen as capable and serious by those around them. So, when they're caught, it's common for people to say, "I can't believe someone like them would do such a thing."
Listening to him, I realized my reaction was just as expected. After his arrest, Randolph apparently reached settlements with the victims. By settling and showing remorse, he hoped for a lighter sentence. However, according to Patrick, the number of cases was too high for a slightly reduced sentence to avoid imprisonment. Moreover, the settlement amounts ranged from $2,000 to $3,000 per case, and with the current 30 known cases, he had lost all his money and would likely spend his days in prison. Not everyone received a settlement, but Randolph has lost all his money and will soon be facing prison time. I'm preparing for the divorce. Apparently, you can get divorced even while the other person is in prison. Through this marriage, I realized that I don't have good judgment when it comes to men. Therefore, from now on, I will focus more on my work rather than on relationships or marriage.
Looking at your face makes me sick. I can't stand living with a monster anymore.
You're getting off here. From inside the car, my mom's gaze bore down on me, icy cold. At 12, I was told by my parents we were moving, and they put me in the car. Then, about 30 minutes into the drive, I was dropped off alone on the side of the road. Why? Aren't we all moving together? Mom then looked at me like I was trash she couldn't stand, with utter disgust. Don't be stupid. I can't stand the thought of you in the same house. You're useless. Ugly. This is where we part ways. Goodbye. Mom slammed the car door shut. Dad, sitting in the driver's seat, just looked down at me, expressionless, saying nothing. This is terrible. Why? Dad. Mom. I collapsed to my knees on the side of the road, sobbing. Literally abandoned by my parents, I was overwhelmed by sadness and fear. As if a blizzard had stirred within my heart. My face bears a large burn scar. Since childhood, my parents would repeatedly scorn its ugliness. Never allowing me treatment, despising me as a monster, constantly complaining about my behavior for it. Yet, they were my only parents. They were the only ones I could rely on to live. And yet, they abandoned me, their daughter. Don't go. Dad. Mom. The car carrying my parents drove off mercilessly. No matter how much I cried out, my voice couldn't reach them anymore. On a road busy with cars, no one stopped for my cries of agony. Alone, amidst the sound of indifferent engines and concrete scenery, I felt utterly isolated. Am I a monster? Aren't monsters part of the family too? I continued to cry, trembling, hands on the ground. All that spread before me was dark despair. What kind of scars does being called a monster and denied dignity leave on a 12-year-old girl? Please, someone help me. Stunned, I curled up on the side of the wide road. And the next name that came out wasn't my parents. I'm not a monster. Help me, Grandma. My name is Sophia. I'm now 37, with 2 children. Raised by my dad, a corporate executive, and my mom, a homemaker, until I was 12. I have a large burn scar on my face from an injury in my childhood, the details of which I don't fully remember. Only the memory of intense heat, pain, and crying out as everything turned red before my eyes. This scar made me the subject of constant stares and whispers, both in preschool and elementary school.
Creepy, ghost girl.
Boys would taunt, and since girls began showing interest in fashion and beauty from an early age, I was ostracized and gossiped about. Naturally, I had no friends, spending recesses alone, reading or studying. My parents explained this scar was due to my carelessness, falling in front of a stove.
You've always been so careless. It's embarrassing for a girl to have such a monstrous face like yours,
Mom would say when discussing the burn. Indeed, looking in the mirror, the red and black mottled skin looked painful. Thinking I could never enjoy fashion or makeup like other girls made me feel gloomy. But being continually rejected by my parents hurt much more than any self-deprecation.
That's why you've grown up to be so gloomy, without a single friend.
Remember the sports meet?
You couldn't participate because no one wanted you on their team. No one wants to be friends with someone with your personality.
Just like Mom, instead of encouraging me, she added insult to injury as I grappled with hurt and isolation. I was made to wear the same clothes until they were tattered, and every time I outgrew them, she would click her tongue in disapproval. Meals consisted of leftovers from Dad and Mom or expired deli items, carelessly placed on the floor, and I never ate with the family. Yet, Mom would often claim she was taking care of me. My dad was often absent due to his busy job, and when he was home, his demeanor was no different from Mom's.
Your face is truly disgusting. With a face like that, you'll never get married.
Because of this, they never protected me. Being constantly rejected by my parents made me believe I was worthless. Ugly in appearance, dark in personality, and ignored by everyone. I felt I had no place at home or at school. Maybe there was no point in living at all. Broken-hearted, I shut myself in my room and immersed myself deeper into my books. The books I read were always borrowed from the school library, ranging from children's literature to biographies of great people, histories of various countries, and even books on unusual sciences. I had plenty of time to myself. Dad was an executive at his company, and he and Mom, being close, often went on trips together, funded by their ample wealth. Being disliked by my parents, I was never taken along, always left to house sit. During these times, I was usually left with Dad's grandma. Staying at Grandma's house felt much more comfortable than being at my own. She was the president of a health food company and lived in a spacious single-family home. She never spoke ill of my burn scars and treated me with respect as an individual. There was also a live-in housekeeper named Emily, who was always kind to me and played with me. When I talked about the books I had recently read, Emily would listen intently without showing any annoyance. If there was something difficult in the books, Grandma and Emily would explain it to me carefully, or sometimes we would research it together. They often helped me with my studies too.
Sophia, are you reading such difficult books already? That's amazing.
Sophia, you're really smart. Being intelligent is important in life. Let's continue to develop that. I had no place at home or school, but both Grandma and Emily always affirmed me. I only felt less alone when I was left at their house. However, I couldn't stay there forever. When my parents' trip was over, Mom would come to pick me up. Those moments were a bit scary for me. In front of Grandma, Mom would hide her true nature and thank her in a voice higher than usual. I'm really sorry for always imposing. I don't know how to thank you enough for taking care of such a child for us. Thank you, truly. After being sent off by Grandma and others, Mom's demeanor would change as soon as we were alone. Her face, previously plastered with a forced smile, would quickly turn to disdain towards me. "Come on, let's go home." Mom, carrying a bunch of fancy souvenirs from the trip, would yank my arm hard. "Don't get too comfortable just because Grandma is kind to you. Even Grandma must find you disgusting. She probably finds it a hassle to deal with you. She's just putting up with it for us. Don't you dare take it for granted." With those words, Mom glared at me. By the time I was dragged out the door, Grandma and Emily could no longer see what was happening. I was roughly pulled along and put back in the car to go home. Back home, the cycle of constant rejection resumed. I didn't have the courage to run away as a primary school student, so I endured everything except for the times I was left at Grandma's house. Then I turned 12 and reached 6th grade. Life didn't change. In fact, it got worse as the girls in my class became more aware of beauty standards. With my burn scars, I was even more ostracized and isolated than before. The harassment from the girls increased, with them saying mean things loudly enough for me to hear or hiding my belongings. Then one day, my parents suddenly announced we were moving. And it seemed the move was scheduled quite soon, as they immediately instructed me to start packing. I had few belongings. My clothes were minimal, and I read books borrowed from the school library, so my packed items barely filled one cardboard box. And then came the day of departure. A few days ago, snow had fallen, cooling down the entire town. I was in the car, heading to our new home with my parents. At that point, I hadn't been told where we were moving to. With various anxieties in my heart, I was swayed by the car. Then, about 10 minutes down the road, the car suddenly stopped and the door opened. "You're getting off here," said my mom with an icy tone, sitting next to me. "Wait, just me?" I asked, taken aback. Sighing heavily, she then looked at me with disdain, as if I were mere trash. Among the parents of my classmates, my mom was known for her beauty and elegance. Despite the day's moving chaos, she was dressed in a floral dress, her makeup impeccable, and her long hair styled meticulously. The transformation of her lips, adorned in red lipstick, into a sneer of disgust was oddly terrifying to me as a child. "How do you not understand? You're the only one getting out here. We're not taking you with us to the new place." "You're kidding me," I whispered in despair. Ignoring my protests, my mom pushed forcefully on my back, urging me out of the car. "I can't stand living with a monster like you anymore. You're useless and ugly. This is where we say goodbye, then." Her gaze from inside the car was as cold as ice. She then unilaterally slammed the car door shut. Sitting in the driver's seat, my dad looked down on me with a blank expression, silent. "How could you do this? Please don't go. Dad. Mom." I sobbed, collapsing to my knees on the road. Literally abandoned by my parents, the world in front of me turned pitch black, filled with sorrow and fear. The winter road felt cold, adding to the anxiety in my heart. Inside, a cold blizzard raged. Yet, the car carrying my parents mercilessly drove away. No matter how much I screamed after it, my voice could no longer reach. No one stopped for my cries of agony. I was utterly alone. Am I a monster? Aren't monsters part of a family? Kneeling on the ground, I continued to cry, shivering. Before me, only a vast expanse of utter despair spread out. How much of a scar does being called a monster and denied dignity leave on a 12-year-old girl? "I'm not a monster. Please, somebody help me, Grandma." The name that came out was no longer that of my parents. Slowly standing up, my vision blurred by tears, I turned around. There stood the grand gate to my grandmother's house. That's right, my parents had abandoned me at my grandmother's doorstep. The moment I resolved to seek her help, the gate opened with a creak.
Thought I heard a car and a girl's voice. Sophia, what in the world happened?
Seeing my tear-streaked face, Grandma exclaimed in surprise. Tears fell from my eyes once again at the sight of her. These weren't tears of shock or despair. Seeing Grandma's face allowed me to cry in relief. Her wise and kind face melted the ice that had formed around my heart. I ran to Grandma and hugged her tightly. Grandma, I've been abandoned by Dad and Mom. They said they couldn't stand living with a monster anymore. That monsters aren't part of the family. I don't know what to do. I continued to cry in Grandma's arms. As I calmed down, still embracing me, Grandma said in a gentle voice, "What a thing to happen. You've had it tough, haven't you? It must have been lonely and scary, but you're safe now. It's good that they dropped you off here. I'll take care of you with all my love." I nodded, crying. "It's cold out here, let's go inside," she said, leading me into the house. The large house had many rooms, but I was always taken to the one Grandma used as a dining room. My body, chilled by the harsh winter wind, gradually warmed up. Grandma made me a warm and delicious soup and listened carefully as I told her everything. When I had finished speaking, Grandma's face was tight with anger and disbelief.
I always thought they were lazy and only interested in luxury, but I never imagined they would go so far as to abandon their own daughter.
Grandma continued, shaking her hand.
I hesitated to say this about my own son, but ever since they started leaving you with me to go on luxurious trips, I had my suspicions.
Sorry. I blurted out, apologizing instinctively. It's okay, dear. Having Sophia here is a joy for both me and Emily. We love talking to you. But it bothered me that it was always just the two of them on these trips, not a family vacation. And when I saw the luxury items they brought back, I couldn't help but feel they were enjoying their lavish lifestyle at your expense. After finishing her soup, Grandma looked at me and smiled, saying, "It's going to be all right.
I'll protect you. And as for them, they'll get what they deserve for abandoning Sophia. Rest easy now, you're safe here with us."
Thank you, Grandma. I'm grateful, I said. Then Emily arrived. After Grandma explained the situation to her, they began to prepare a meal together for the three of us. The meat was juicy, the salad was filled with fresh vegetables. With delicious soup and a variety of other dishes, it was a feast that filled both body and soul.
To welcome Sophia, let's have a party.
With a beaming smile, Grandma spoke. The three of us quickly passed the time enjoying our meal. After dinner, Grandma sat me down for a serious talk. It was about the burn on my face. I had been told by my mom that it was my fault for being careless and bumping into the stove when I was little. However, the truth Grandma told was completely different. My dad, currently an executive at a subsidiary of Grandma's company, was vice president at the headquarters back then. However, his performance and attitude towards employees became a problem, leading to his demotion. Though he took an executive position at the subsidiary, his salary significantly decreased compared to what it was when he was a potential president. This led to an argument with my mom after she found out. Upset that they could no longer live luxuriously, my mom became furious, and the argument escalated. In an attempt to push my dad, my mom's arm hit me, and I was pushed into the stove face first with great force. That was the real story behind my burn. It wasn't my carelessness, but my parents' fault. And my mom lied to me to protect herself, continuously insulting me about the scar as if I were an outlet for her stress. That's awful, I said.
Yes, it is. I debated whether to tell you, given your age, but considering your situation, I felt responsible for staying silent. So, I thought it was time to tell you, Grandma explained.
Thank you for telling me, I replied. My feelings towards my parents shifted from fear to anger. I longed to prove them wrong someday. What could I do? My studies were all I had, but Grandma once told me my intelligence could be my weapon. I resolved to focus more on my studies than ever before, determined to get back at my parents. And then, in the blink of an eye, 25 years passed. I followed through with my resolve, and Grandma supported me through college. She also took me to the hospital for treatment of my burn scar. After years of treatment, the scar had faded significantly and became less noticeable as an adult. With makeup, it could be hidden well. During this time, Grandma's house underwent significant renovations and expansions, growing to a size of 990 square meters. The housekeeper changed a few times due to personal reasons, and now Madison was helping with household chores. The year I turned 37, Grandma passed away. At the age of 95. Her health had gradually declined after turning 80, and she passed away peacefully in a hospital after several admissions. Though I grieved for Grandma, who had done so much for me, I had no regrets. I learned many things from her, and vowed to treasure these lessons as I continued with my life. As for my parents, they never once reached out to me. We didn't know each other's contact information, and they never appeared at Grandma's house. Effectively, 25 years had passed in estrangement. Even when Grandma was ill and after her passing, my dad, her son, never showed up. Disgusted at how he could neglect his family to such an extent, I handled all the hospital formalities and funeral arrangements since I had lived with her for so long. The large house felt empty with only me and Madison left. Continuing to work hard, the same year Grandma died, an unexpected visitor came to the house.
What's happening with Mom's inheritance?
The person asking as he entered was my dad, whom I hadn't seen in 25 years. Mom was behind him. Both had aged, but their spiteful gaze remained unchanged. Behind them stood Madison, looking troubled, having let them through the gate to the front door. After 25 years without a word exchanged, and not even attending the funeral, why come now? As I wondered, Mom looked me over with a calculating gaze and said mockingly,
"Oh? That monster girl has finally become a human."
She must have been referring to my face. Hearing that, anger boiled inside me. I knew whose fault it was for my appearance. Mom had no right to mock my face. As I glared at them, Dad, seemingly impatient, began pacing and surveying the house as if appraising it. "Ah, remodeled, I see. Turned into a fine house. This means there's hope for the inheritance." With those words, I understood their motive. Having learned of Grandma's passing, they were after the inheritance of Grandma, who had been the president of the company.
"You came for the inheritance? After leaving me behind and not contacting me for 25 years. You didn't even come to Grandma's funeral."
My reply turned increasingly angry. Unforgivable. I could never accept it. We had no choice.
"We were on a trip during the funeral. Besides, I'm her son, so I should inherit, right? We got no contact, so we came ourselves."
Irritated by his presumptuous tone, I silently went to fetch a debit card. I didn't want to let my parents into the house. I didn't want their dirty feet trampling over the precious place where Grandma and I had spent our time. Returning to the entrance, I handed them the debit card as demanded. Their greedy smiles at the sight of a large sum of cash were truly revolting. But that expression lasted only a moment, as their faces turned pale upon seeing the debit card and its balance.
"What? This is all there is? You're lying, right?
Dad raised his voice, expressing his displeasure. It's not a lie. This is all of Grandma's savings. You know Mom was the president of the company. It's impossible for someone like her to have only this much saved. There must be another bank account hidden. Hurry up and hand it over. Dad stormed into the house, ignoring my attempts to stop him. He quickly found the cabinet where valuables were stored and began searching through drawers for other debit cards. There's nothing. No other debit cards anywhere. I told you there's none. If you understand, then stop rummaging through the house. Grandma had consolidated her bank accounts into one, so there really were no hidden accounts. No matter how much they searched, they wouldn't find anything else. Dad clicked his tongue loudly, and Mom hysterically raised her voice. What's the point then? We came all this way because they say you have to claim your inheritance within a year. That's right. Even if there's no cash, we have this house. It's huge, so this house is ours now, right? Dad looked at me with a smug grin, as if he had come up with a brilliant idea. Sorry, but that's not possible. When I turned 18, Grandma changed the house's title to my name. The remodeling was done then, too. It's been over 10 years, so it can't be considered for the compulsory portion of the inheritance. Hearing this, Dad's face turned beet red. Mom, equally infuriated, screamed with her eyes bulging. What is this? What's going on? Why does it belong to you? A monster shouldn't be receiving anything. Mom's shrieking figure somehow looked pitiful to me now. Amidst the swirl of old frustrations and anger, I felt a chill at the core of my head. Taking a breath, I calmly told Mom, I've always wanted to say this, but I am not a monster. I'm a human being. There's no reason for Mom and Dad, who only think about their luxuries, to insult me. I also know from Grandma why I bumped into the stove. At that moment, Mom, eyes wide, lunged at me. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. How dare you speak like that? Mom grabbed me by the collar, startling me momentarily. It's your fault for being there in the first place. That's why you're worthless. That's why you're a monster. There's nothing wrong with that. She hurled every insult she could think of at me, shaking my collar repeatedly. After a struggle, with Madison's help, I managed to break free from her grasp. From a distance, Dad's voice could be heard. But there must be other assets, right? Like jewelry, valuable dishes, and such. Saying this, Dad began rummaging through another cabinet. Mom glanced at me menacingly for a moment before following Dad. Then, they ravaged Grandma's meticulously kept rooms out of greed. The living room, guest room, kitchen, everything was disrupted, drawers were pulled out violently, and items scattered on the floor and tables were knocked over. The sight of Grandma's beautiful home being destroyed was too much, and I screamed out. Stop! Don't touch that! Shut up! It's none of your business. Mom snapped, searching through a closet. Dad barged into another room, continuing the chaos. Please stop! I'm calling the police! I pleaded. Go ahead and call. Dad taunted, so I, without hesitation, called the police with Madison's help. Given my known profession, the responding officers arrived quickly upon hearing of the intrusion. Two sturdy policemen soon subdued Dad and Mom. Stop! I'm the son of this house. We just asked our daughter to let us in for a bit. They tried to excuse themselves while attempting to escape, but they were no match for the strong officers and were dragged outside. After the storm passed, I collapsed in the hallway. Madison apologized for letting them in, but I reassured her it wasn't her fault. After catching my breath, I began cleaning up the mess they made. When I turned 18, Grandma, hoping for my future, transferred the house and all her assets to me as a living gift. Noticing my intellect, she saw potential for me to take over the company as an entrepreneur. Already advanced in age, Grandma thought about having me take over the company in the future. At the same time, she wanted to sever ties with Dad and Mom, who abandoned me and, despite being executives, did not do their jobs properly and seemed intent on ruining the company. Thus, she had been preparing little by little so that most of her estate would pass to me after her death. Grandma taught me not only school subjects but also about arts, world cultures, knowledge of economics, the demeanor of a professional, and how to behave as a business owner. To me, this knowledge was more valuable than any house or money. She always taught me this. Money is very important, but people are even more so. Money is necessary for the world and the company. But the people who work for the company and the customers are even more important. Those who don't value people will never find happiness. Grandma repeated these teachings, and they were firmly engraved in my heart. And as promised, I took over her company. Now, I am the president of the company. Afterward, Dad and Mom contacted the house several times, inquiring about life insurance or the cash they thought should have been passed on to me, but their wishes were never fulfilled. Most of Grandma's estate had been used up for my tuition and the house renovations, and she had also made me the beneficiary of her life insurance. Thanks to the excellent lawyer and accountant she had introduced to me, who had served her for many years, Dad and Mom were always out-argued and had to back down. A few months later, it was decided that the subsidiary where Dad worked as an executive would be absorbed by the headquarters. The ongoing suspicions about performance reached a limit, making it difficult to continue operating as a subsidiary. Consequently, Dad's dismissal was decided. Not only had he failed to perform his duties and contributed to poor performance, but it was also discovered he had been embezzling company funds. This became a widespread issue, and it would be more accurate to say he was fired for misconduct. Since Mom was a housewife, their income disappeared with Dad's dismissal. Having spent lavishly on trips and luxury brands, they had no savings, and it was only a matter of time before they would struggle even for living expenses. At that time, tired from work, I received a call at home from an unknown number. Being the president of a company, it wasn't unusual to receive calls from unregistered numbers, so I answered without hesitation. "Hey, Sophia. It's me, your mom." The voice that came through was Mom's, who had hurled abuse at me for so long. I didn't want to hear that voice again and was about to hang up, but I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "How could you get Dad fired? I don't work, and I can't live like this. Are you going to take responsibility? We'll come to your house. You'll take care of us, right?" Hearing her move forward with such a convenient story, I was astounded. After all the disdain and the recent ransacking of the house, to now live together and expect support was beyond audacious. I cut her off immediately. "Wait, what are you talking about? That's not possible." Mom quickly soured. "What do you mean? I'm your parent. It's a child's duty to help when their parents are struggling. You're the president of a company, you're not short on money." I stood firm against such selfish reasoning. "I have no obligation to live with people who have badmouthed and abandoned me. I haven't forgotten what you've done. You're not my parents in any sense." After saying that, I ended the call and immediately blocked Mom's number. I was deeply dismayed and spent some time lost in thought. I remembered Mom's glamorous dresses and the fancy bags she brought back from trips. She had always lived according to her desires. I won't help now. hoping nothing strange happens again. I fell asleep with a prayer. However, my prayer went unanswered. A few days later, my parents showed up at the house again. Unfortunately, it was Madison's day off, so there was no one to send them away. Since I responded to the doorbell, pretending not to be home wasn't an option. I had no choice but to go out.
How cruel of you to refuse to live with us,
Mom said, distorting her face and spewing venom as soon as she saw me. Next to her, Dad, glaring at me, said roughly,
"If we can't live here, then give us money. As a CEO who fired me, you must be earning well. Just give us $10,000 a month, starting with $10,000 right now."
I felt dizzy from their audacity. I erased all expressions from my face and shook my head quietly.
"I've said this before, but I have no obligation to give you anything. I don't even consider you as my parents, so please leave."
As I tried to close the gate, Dad forcefully held it open.
"Don't be stupid. We're telling you we can't live without money. $10,000 is just pocket change for you, right? I don't have such pocket change. Every amount of money must be valued. That's what Grandma taught me."
Unlike my parents, who would spend as much as they earned, she taught me the value of money. Giving them money would not lead to prudent living on their part. Then, Mom started making a scene.
"What's the point of bringing up someone who's already dead? Just give us the money. We won't move from here until you do."
With that, they crossed their arms and sat down right there. Having them squat there was a nuisance not only to me but to the neighbors as well. I quickly took out my mobile phone from my pocket and called the police. Just like before, the officers arrived quickly and detained my parents. This time, I asked for a restraining order against them. They were still ranting as they were taken away by the police, but now, it was truly none of my concern. I just wished they would find work and live on their own. They had to sell off most of their accumulated luxury goods and cars, living in a cheap, old apartment with the money from those sales. It seems both of them had accumulated debts from their spending habits. They had been counting on Grandma's inheritance, which they believed they would receive. Living in poverty with about $40,000 in debt each became their new reality. Mom, who had thrown a fit when Dad was demoted, couldn't stand the now unemployed and poor Dad, planning to divorce him because she had no use for a man without money. However, realizing she would still have to pay off her own debts even after divorce, Mom, who had been a housewife, withdrew the divorce and started working part-time, all the while looking down on Dad. The relationship that once seemed close enough for frequent trips together broke down, and their life together turned hostile. Every day, Mom would taunt the penniless Dad, leading to fruitless arguments, making them the neighborhood nuisances. A contact living near their apartment informed me that their spending habits hadn't changed. They spent their meager earnings from low-wage jobs on luxury goods and expensive meals, eventually being chased down by debt collectors. Recognized as problematic by the apartment manager, they fled as if running away. And their whereabouts after that are unknown to anyone. Dad and Mom, who had denied and abandoned their own daughter, were eventually forsaken by money and the world. As for me, continuing as president of the company Grandma left me, my business acumen is highly regarded by clients and employees alike. As a result, I've expanded the company by establishing subsidiaries nationwide, choosing competent personnel as presidents for each, and the company continues to grow. Money is very important, but people are even more so. I continue to uphold Grandma's teaching as my principle. Additionally, based on my own experiences, I started supporting activities for people struggling with burns, fire accidents, or injuries. Many company employees voluntarily supported the initiative, And as the activities spread through our website, the organization's operations have become busier. Though I didn't expect any personal relationships due to my busy work, I became personally involved with a male executive assistant who supported me during a busy period of business expansion, leading to a relationship. A few years later, we married and were blessed with 2 children. My precious children are treasures just by being there. I'm committed to raising them with love, ensuring they never suffer physical or emotional harm. Money is very important. But people are even more important. Surrounded by the company's employees, business partners, my husband, and our lovely children, I will live my life happily, never forgetting my gratitude and affection for these important people. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce. So said Matthew as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyson's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Let's show him whose daughter he's angered. While Matthew turned pale, I couldn't help but smirk. I am Sabrina, a 32-year-old corporate executive and mother of 1. I have a 7-year-old son named Harlan and my husband's name is Matthew. Matthew and I met at a party thrown by mutual friends during our college days. Back then, we had no interest in each other and merely exchanged contact information. Hey, weren't you at that party? Sabrina, right? Oh, Matthew? The following year, by coincidence, I used the bank where he worked and we reconnected. That led to us keeping in touch regularly and eventually started dating. After I got pregnant with Harlan, we got married. Matthew was known for his serious and meticulous work, which made my friends envy that I had him as my husband. I, too, was happy to have married him. Mom, why does this become this? Hold on a sec. I don't know that much myself, so I'll look into it. Okay. Harlan, perhaps inheriting traits from Matthew, is studious and curious. He's always asking questions, which keeps me on my toes with my own studies. What's this? Why? Surprisingly, Harlan's admiration is not for Matthew but for my dad. My mother passed away from illness, and my dad, despite his busy work life, raised me as a single parent. I'm sorry, but it's hard to get along with your dad. Well, it can't be helped, but don't say that to him. He's quite sensitive about it. No way, I could. My dad is a kind man but looks intimidating and somewhat scary. Matthew is also not comfortable around him due to his appearance. My dad, aware of this, has always tried not to interfere too much. Thus, our life was peaceful at the beginning, a life that seemed full of promise. But that changed drastically after we got married. Hey! Where did you put my mobile phone? Don't say it like I'm responsible for it. Isn't it still on the charger? Right after waking up, Matthew would ask grumpily. Indeed, his mobile phone was where he left it charging the night before. No apologies or thanks from him, just a click of his tongue, which irritated me. Matthew changed after we got married. And whenever he had the chance, he would say this. I'm an elite banker. Thanks to me, you're living a comfortable life. Yet Matthew doesn't contribute financially at home. He spends his entire salary on himself, yet acts as if he's supporting the household. In reality, I'm the one supporting our family. I pay for all the utilities and groceries. Hey! What's with these new clothes?
They're for Harlan. He's outgrown his old ones.
Don't spend my money on luxuries. I'm paying with my own salary. I don't even have access to your account. Yet, if I take Harlan out for a meal or buy new clothes, he immediately complains. He seems to dislike any form of luxury, no matter how small. On the other hand, my dad is the type of person who's willing to spend money for our sake.
The apartment you're in now is too small, right? That's why I bought the condo you and Matthew wanted to live in. And it's not far from my place, so I could be close with you guys.
He said, laughing, and gave us the top floor as a gift. And to be there for us in times of need, he lives on a different floor in the same building. Mom, can I go to Grandpa's?
Of course, but just because it's the same building doesn't mean you can stay out late. Make sure you come back before it gets dark.
Okay. It might be natural for Harlan to be closer to his grandfather than his father, Matthew. Whenever he has the chance, Harlan goes to see my dad.
Where's Harlan?
At Dad's place. Is that so? Matthew never complains about my dad to him directly. And it seems he's careful not to say too much around Harlan, fearing he might tell my dad. It's just me he's bold with. Certainly, I keep quiet not to trouble my dad. Well, if it's just complaints, I can ignore them. That's how lightly I thought of it as. And so unlike my dad, Matthew doesn't participate in childcare at all.
I've been called out by Alyson, so I'm heading out.
What? Again? And it's Matthew's childhood friend Alyson who's stealing away his time from childcare. I dislike her, more than just being uncomfortable around her. Matthew and I are like siblings. So please don't misunderstand. Every time she meets me, she would say something like that. Yet, she always tries to assert her dominance. Matthew used to be. As if she knows Matthew better than I do, which is just annoying. Valeria, Matthew's mother-in-law, also dotes on Alyson, which complicates things further.
Why did Matthew choose such a woman instead of Alyson? He should have married Alyson.
When called to my in-laws, Valeria made sure to say such things loud enough for me to hear. John, my father-in-law, always scolds her for it, but she doesn't seem to care. Alyson claims to be a natural airhead.
I'm just a natural airhead, that's why I rely on Matthew so much. I don't mean to make Sabrina uncomfortable.
This might be okay if she were younger. But she's 28, not exactly young. It's time she acted her age. The reason she and Matthew didn't end up together is because of John.
I don't want such a woman even as an in-law. If it really comes down to it, I'll divorce you.
Alyson can hardly be called as a good person. She's notorious for playing around with men and doesn't work either. Whatever she wants, she gets Matthew to buy for her. John despises Alyson and strongly opposed their relationship. I could never understand why Valeria adores Alyson so much.
I'm sorry for my wife's behavior. It's not something you should apologize for, John.
Matthew too. To not defend his wife from such remarks, and instead, being friendly with such a woman. True to John's words, no matter what Valeria says about me, Matthew never defends me. Sometimes, he even laughs.
Why do you say those things, Grandma? If Mom and Dad hadn't met, I wouldn't be born. Does that mean I'm an unwanted child to you, Grandma?
No, that's not true at all. Harlan always stands up for me in place of Matthew. Harlan may not understand how children are made, but he knows they can't be born without both parents. Valeria adores her brilliant grandson, so she refrains from making such remarks in front of Harlan. In that aspect, Valeria and Matthew are very alike, making it seem they really are related.
I have plans to drink with Alyson tonight, so I'll be home late.
Oh, really? Gradually, I started to wonder if Matthew was necessary for us at all. And I began preparing for divorce. Harlan seemed to sense something too.
If there's anything I can help with, just let me know.
He said, showing concern for me. Then, I was summoned by Valeria. I really didn't want to go, but she kept calling persistently enough that it would affect my work if I didn't show up. John is away on business, so there's no one to carry heavy things. Can you buy some rice? Apparently, John was on a business trip. I wanted to tell her to just order it online, but saying that would clearly lead to an argument. After being tasked with carrying heavy items after work, I was exhausted. As I was heading back to the condo in a daze, my body was thrown by a car. It seems a car that ran a red light hit me. The driver who hit you fled the scene, and we're currently investigating. I was informed while lying in a hospital bed. For now, I left Harlan in my father's care and decided to stay in the hospital for a while. I broke my arm, so I couldn't work properly in this state. When I was being worried about such things, my dad scolded me. First, worry about your own health. Harlan, my father, and John, who came back in a hurry after hearing about the accident, visited me frequently, but Matthew and Valeria did not visit me at all. Well, that was within my expectations. Coming in. What? So, I was surprised when Matthew showed up in my hospital room. Sign this. Matthew presented me with divorce papers. Already signed by him, with Valeria's name as a witness. With that arm, you won't be able to work. Now that you can't make money, you're useless to me. What is that supposed to mean? And besides, Alyson is pregnant with my child. My thoughts froze at those words. Alyson is pregnant with Matthew's child. I'm going to marry Alyson. So just sign this quickly. Saying that, Matthew turned his back on me. As if I was of no further use to him. Being broke and useless is grounds for divorce. Matthew said as he left the divorce papers on the table and walked out. I was left staring at those papers, dumbfounded, on my hospital bed. I had my suspicions for a while. But, to think he was actually cheating. And he's leaving me because I'm useless and can't earn money while hospitalized and because Alyson's pregnant? Mom? Startled, I looked up to find my precious son Harlan and my dad standing there. My dad looked at what I was holding and frowned. What are you going to do? There's only one thing to do. I answered while looking straight at my dad. My dad nodded in agreement. Well then, let's fight back. With some persuasion, I managed an early discharge and headed to the bank where Matthew works. My dad, who drove me there, cheered me on. You can do it. Then he dropped me off in front of the bank and drove away. As I entered the bank, Matthew, noticing me, frowned. Coincidentally, there were no other customers in front of Matthew. I approached him directly. I'm closing all the company accounts. What? Matthew's expression clearly said, what are you talking about? Without taking a number, I stood directly at the counter, noticing a few annoyed glances from others. Oh, excuse me. Maybe you didn't understand without the company name. What are you? I'm Sabrina Gibney. I recently took over my father and became the CEO. The company is Gibney Corporation. What the? Gibney Corporation is an IT company my father founded, now employing 1,900 staffs. And is quite well known in this area and within the industry due to its rapid growth in one generation. That's why Matthew was so surprised. That's a lie, right? You're just trying to get back at me. If you think so, why don't you check? Matthew started checking something immediately at my words. While he was busy, I looked around. Having mentioned the company name, the surrounding people were now paying attention to us. Oh my God, what? No way. It seemed he had confirmed it. Matthew looked up at me hesitantly. You're really from that Gibney Corporation? Let's show him whose daughter he has angered. Contrary to Matthew's pale face, I smirked unpleasantly. That's right, so please proceed with the cancellation quickly. Wait, if you cancel all at once like this. By the way, my father is quite angry about this matter as well. Quickly pack your things and leave the apartment. What? Why should I be the one to leave? It seems Matthew had forgotten that the apartment was purchased by my father, and the ownership was in my father's name. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought Alyssa in while I was hospitalized and still be living there.
Forgot? That apartment was bought by my father, the former president. You haven't contributed any money, let alone for living expenses. You've been spending everything on your childhood friend and mistress, Alyssa. In fact, you've been living on my salary. Who do you think has been supporting your lifestyle? Well, about that. And now, because she's pregnant, you expect me to hand over the apartment to you and your mistress? How much more do you intend to insult me?
I made sure to speak loudly enough for those around to hear. And of course, Matthew was flustered. After all, he's known for being serious. That he, of all people, wouldn't contribute financially at home and was cheating with a childhood friend. The looks we received from those around us turned cold.
Is that true? What?
The one who approached me was Ogden, the branch manager of this bank. He had been here for a while, listening to our conversation.
I believe we need to have a detailed discussion. I am very sorry for the inconvenience caused by our bank employee.
And with that, Ogden offered a deep apology. Following this, I was taken to the back to discuss further with Matthew, Ogden, and myself. There, I explained the situation to Ogden in detail.
I am terribly sorry for the trouble our employee has caused.
Ogden sighed deeply and apologized again. Next to him, Matthew sat looking displeased, and to that, Ogden forcibly grabbed his head to make him apologize.
I understand your feelings, Sabrina. It's natural not to want to entrust your money to a bank that employs such people. If you're considering closing your account, we can arrange that. I am no longer his wife. If you accept one condition, I might reconsider closing the account.
The two of them looked up hopefully at my words. It was a good deal for Ogden, but the worst possible condition for Matthew.
If you fire Matthew here, I would like to continue my contract with this bank.
What?
Of course. We were actually planning to let him go.
It seemed Ogden had already intended to do so. Matthew, initially confused, gradually turned red in the face. As he was about to say something.
Excuse me, but Sabrina's father has arrived.
Another bank employee approached us. I had asked Ogden to let him in, thwarting Matthew, who, frustrated, closed his mouth.
Why do I have to be here? What? Mom?
Sorry for making you wait.
Dad entered, firmly holding Valeria's arm. Valeria, looking displeased, glared at me upon seeing me.
This is your doing. What are you trying to accomplish? I'll never forgive you for treating your mother-in-law like this. Quiet.
As Valeria began to shout, my dad fiercely scolded her. Giving an even more intimidating look, he managed to silence them.
I know you've been harassing my daughter. Calling her for trivial tasks, making her carry heavy things. Despite this, instead of showing gratitude, you prefer to listen, and you made sure my daughter heard it. And Matthew, far from defending, laughed, and even Harlan had to step in to protect her.
My dad's angry voice echoed through the bank. Matthew tried to intervene but remained silent under my dad's stern gaze.
And I'm aware that Alyssa is the one who hit Sabrina. That woman has already been arrested by the police.
Could Alyssa really have done such a thing?
Why are you surprised? You're the mastermind.
My dad scolded at her even more. Meanwhile, Matthew, seemingly unaware, froze in shock.
What? You both are the worst. Sabrina, let's go.
Yes. Prompted by my dad, we headed outside. Ogden followed, apologizing repeatedly. Thinking I might continue the contract with Ogden in charge, we heard Matthew and Valeria arguing loudly behind us. It seemed they were blaming each other. Their voices could be heard outside, and the customers and bank employees who were present whispered that what they had heard was true.
Just as planned. Yes. They reacted just as we expected, which helped.
Our plan had gone smoothly, and we left the bank laughing confidently. As a result, Matthew was indeed fired. Thanks to the police conducting a thorough investigation, Alyson received a prison sentence. As for Valeria, she was forced to divorce John after it was discovered she had instigated Alyson to run me over in an attempt to get rid of me. Valeria was also taken into custody by the police.
Welcome back, Mom, Grandpa. I'm home.
Thank you for looking after Harlan, John.
No problem.
Seems like you've settled everything at the bank. After cornering Matthew and his accomplices at the bank, I went to pick up Harlan, whom I had left with John. John had helped a lot this time too. He found evidence that Valeria was instigating Alyson and discovered notes about their plan to eliminate me, which he handed over to the police. When I thanked him for everything, John said with a smile,
"You did great."
Since then, my days have become busier than ever. Being busy as a next-in-line president and a board member already, becoming president has added even more responsibility on me due to Matthew. And as for my dad, he started a new company.
"I've always wanted to start a new company,"
he said, pushing the presidency onto me, eager to show Matthew up. Because of that, both my father and I became busy, so John has been looking after Harlan. Apparently, John's business trip was forced upon him because Valeria was having an affair with his boss. He took early retirement and moved into a vacant apartment in our building.
I'm currently studying about remote work.
Planning to eventually entrust him with work, I've sent someone knowledgeable his way. He seems very capable, so I'd like him to excel in my new company. It seems my dad and John got along very well after this incident, often visiting each other's apartments to drink and chat. On the other hand, Matthew, having been driven out, returned to his empty family home. Unable to find employment at any bank with rumors spread by my dad and I everywhere, he was left unemployable, forced to pay me compensation through debts. Now, spending his days tirelessly working part-time jobs, he came crying to us, but we collectively ignored him. Once rumored to be on the fast track to becoming a branch manager, he has fallen far.
When I grow up, I want to be like Grandpa.
Harlan has come to respect my dad even more after this incident. Seeing him as a hero for rescuing us from the malicious acts of Matthew and Valeria. Would you take over for Grandpa someday?
Yes.
Hearing Harlan's willingness to follow in his footsteps, my dad was overjoyed. Determined not to be outdone by my father, I resolved to work even harder. Eventually, both my company and my father's company settled down.
Oh, welcome home, Mom.
Welcome back, looks like you worked hard. When I come home exhausted, I find John had already prepared dinner for us.
I helped today too. Really? That's great, Harlan. I'm looking forward to dinner.
Praising Harlan's effort with a smile, my dad also returned home late. Then, the four of us sat around the dining table, chatting and eating dinner together. In stark contrast to us, Matthew and his accomplices were scattered. Matthew piled up debts upon debts, eventually becoming indebted to a loan shark. And I heard rumors he was put on a ship. Matthew's family home was sold to pay off his debts, and Valeria, now without a place to go, was spotted living under a bridge by an acquaintance.
By the way, I received an apology letter from Alyson's parents. They're good people, I hope you'll read it. If you say so, John.
According to the letter from Alyson's parents, she gave birth in prison. They took the child in, and after Alyson's release, they moved away to ensure she wouldn't rely on them. The letter contained deep apologies to me. Alyson's parents seem like very good people. I sincerely hope the child grows up to resemble their grandparents rather than their parents. Nonetheless, Alyson too has lost a place to return to. I hope she reflects on her sins in her solitude. Time passed by and it had been 10 years since the divorce. We've grown without being troubled by Matthew.
Did I even have a dad?
Apparently, he vaguely remembers Matthew's existence but considers irrelevant to his life. And I too have completely forgotten about his existence.
I've decided to take over Grandpa's company after all.
If that's what you've decided, I won't object. Harlan chose to inherit my dad's company, which was originally a company making toys. Starting as an ordinary employee, Harlan is valued for his constant flow of ideas.
Maybe it's time to leave the company in Harlan's hands.
My dad would say so in a laugh. Once he hands over the company to Harlan, he plans to live a quiet life in the countryside. I'm also finding a successor and teaching them my job earnestly. Once they've grown enough, I too might consider early retirement and start a new path. With that thought of future in mind, I will continue to work as the CEO.
She's not family, that's why he sent her home.
How could she say such a thing about my mother?
That one's just a housekeeper. This is a family trip, right? Those without blood ties are strangers. She's probably tending to the fields I told her to buy now.
My grandfather said too, laughing. My father and I were shocked.
Cut the crap.
What would happen after his shouting? My name is Hannah, and I'm 17 years old now. I live in the rural area, which is still common to have extended families living together. My friends' homes are the same, and of course, so is ours. My paternal grandparents, my parents, and I live together. Living together is one thing, but what comes with it is the constant harassment.
Hey, Olivia, isn't the seasoning in today's meal a bit strong? Well, it might be just right for our son and grandchild, but it's a bit much for us old folks. Sorry about that. I thought I was being careful. Careful, huh? And it's still this salty? Are you trying to shorten our lives by feeding us all this salt? Right, it's common for wives to cold-heartedly bully us frail elderly. You know, the wife in the house next door also.
Come on, it started again. My grandparents always find some way to make snide remarks to my mother, Olivia. It's always about something so unreasonable. Like today's dinner, it's not even that salty. Moreover, she's prepared separate portions for us and for the grandparents, seasoning them differently. I tried tasting it, and indeed, the elderly portion is bland. To me, the seasoning is far from enough. How can this be considered high in salt? Maybe it's better not to season it at all. Although my mother, who is used to it, just nodded along, I couldn't stand it and fought back. Grandpa, give it a rest. This is super lightly seasoned already. If you still think it's bland, why don't you taste your own sweat? A kid should be quiet. If Grandpa says it's too strong, then it's too strong.
That's right. Hannah, you're just a kid, you wouldn't understand. For us elderly, it's quite strong. Your mother could make it lighter. That's why she's a bad wife. Hannah, make sure you don't turn out like her.
Well, I love my mother's cooking. Unlike some tasteless old geezers, I'm in my rebellious phase, so there's no way I'm just going to take it and say okay. Catching a glimpse of my mother, she just hung her head, looking troubled, without retorting. She must have felt my gaze because she looked at me and gave me a weary smile. That tired smile pained my heart. It's not just about the cooking. Day in and day out, my grandparents always have something terrible to say to her. Like how she does the laundry wrong, or how her cleaning is not up to snuff. They even insist that leftovers are good enough for my mother's lunch, and that she should shower last. The list goes on. What era do they think this is? It's like something out of old drama series, these torments. The coldness my grandparents show my mother has another reason. It's because my parents keep their distance from my grandparents' peculiar faith. Instead of Christ, my grandparents worship Satan daily. They seem to blame my mother for my father, their son, being utterly indifferent to their faith. Their frequent saying is,
"That one, Satan will drop into hell."
My busy father is often away, and I come home late from the sports lessons. During that time, my housewife mother is left alone with my grandparents. Dad, Grandpa and Grandma were saying awful things to Mom again. They even suggested she's plotting something, saying the seasoning was strong when it was clearly bland. I reported to my father, who came home late at night. Honestly, I hate to bother my already tired father with such stories. But as his daughter, I just can't stay silent, can I?
Man, happened again? Those two really are something. They don't realize that thanks to Olivia managing the house, they can enjoy their carefree retirement.
It's all thanks to you too. I'm always grateful.
Dear, it makes me happy to hear you say that. Hannah, you're such a good girl.
No, I'm currently in my rebellious phase. It's just that my rebellion is aimed at my grandparents, so I'm less harsh on my parents. That's how much I dislike, or rather, detest my grandparents.
Don't worry about it, Hannah. I'll talk to them. Just keep being on your mom's side, okay?
My father said, patting my head, half irritated at being treated like a child, but also half pleased. Teenage emotions are complicated. One Sunday, I woke up late and lazily got out of bed, only to find my father arguing with grandmother.
Enough already, Mom!
My father's shouting voice snapped me to full alertness. Peeking into the living room, I saw my grandmother sitting on the sofa, looking grumpy. My father stood in front of her, and his face beat red with anger.
Making her work in the fields on such a cold day, what are you thinking?
He shouted. He is a regular office worker, but my grandparents are farmers, true to their rural roots. Though the size of their fields has greatly reduced due to old age.
Field work? Is Grandpa doing it?
Looking outside, I saw nothing but a white snowy landscape. The fields must be covered in snow. Is there something they're concerned about? When I was just thinking how dangerous it is for the elderly to work in the fields in such cold weather.
Oh, I'm starving. What's all this ruckus about? Where's Olivia? Isn't lunch ready yet?
My grandfather came in, scratching his belly. Okay, he is here. Wait, that means...
Wait, don't tell me Mom's.
My mother does indeed help out with my grandparents' farm work occasionally. But it's only during the harvest or busy times, generally, she doesn't. That's what I thought, but...
That's exactly it. I asked Mom where Oliver went, and she wouldn't say, so when I pressed her, what's the need to do anything in such snow?
Then she really went out. Oh my goodness.
Well, managing the fields during winter is crucial. I know that. I'm asking if it's necessary in the snow.
Snow repeatedly freezes and melts, messing up the soil. If you don't remove the snow, it'll be trouble in spring.
Lies. I remember hearing that when snow covers the ground, it's best to leave it be. You deal with snow before it falls or after the ground thaws.
Huh, is that so? Well, it's not the time to be impressed.
Anyway, Dad, we need to get Mom quickly. Right, that was the point. Mom, let's talk later, okay?
It's unbelievable that my mother has been working alone in such snow. Besides, it's starting to snow again. My father and I hurriedly put on our coats, boots, and dashed out of the house. She was there in the field. Exhaling white breath, her face red, she was shoveling snow. My father rushed over to her, and she gave a feeble smile. That smile again pained my heart. Why didn't I notice? While I was leisurely sleeping till noon, how many hours had she been shoveling snow? Being busy with work he brought home, my father hadn't noticed either and kept apologizing to the exhausted her. Sorry, Mom. Really sorry. That day, my grandmother got scolded by my angry father.
You will be the one to fall into hell.
After that, my grandparents were unusually quiet for a while. Seasons turned, and summer was approaching. The new term would start, and I would finally be in 12th grade.
How about going on a trip?
My father suggested. We have not traveled for a long time. After all, it's unlikely to go on family trips after high school graduation. Understanding the lonely feelings of a father, I pretended it was a hassle, but inside, I was excited. After all, parents pay for everything on family trips. There will be plenty of activities to do.
Oh, that sounds nice. How about a beach?
My rising spirits dropped at my grandmother's words.
Wait, are you coming too?
I regretted saying it immediately. Stepped on a landmine.
What a terrible grandchild. Planning to leave us out. A kid like that, Satan will.
She started, and eventually,
Olivia. It's because of your poor upbringing that Hannah has grown into such an unthoughtful child. What a useless, no good mother.
She began taking it out on my mother.
Hey!
I might have said something wrong, but it's not fair to blame Mom for that. Oh, how sad for a grandma to have such a cold grandchild. It's all because Oliver didn't discipline properly. Woe is me.
Seriously? Woe is me, she actually said that. Astonished, I decided to give some payback by saying out loud,
Stop joking.
However, she continued to fake cry, while my grandfather nodded in agreement. Seeing the chaotic situation, my father sighed and tried to settle things.
All right. How about we go together?
Instantly, my grandmother's face lit up with a smile. Despite the troublesome situation, I was also looking forward to the trip. The day arrived. Living in the countryside, the airport was far. After hours' drive, we still had plenty of time before the scheduled flight. It's been a while since I visited the airport, so I wandered off from my family. When I thought it was about time and returned, I saw my grandparents sitting on the waiting chairs. Looking around for my parents, my father came back, munching on something. Looks tasty, Dad.
Yeah, this is really good.
You were eating something in the car, right? But I was also hungry, so I asked for one.
Olivia, you want it? Oh, where's she?
With a snack in hand, my father looked around.
Hannah, do you know where Mom is?
Weren't you with her, Dad?
No, she said she'd stay and watch the luggage. We said we'd go for a walk.
Hey Grandpa, do you know where Mom is? His response was unclear. Grandma, was Mom here when you came back? Yes, she was. So she was here. Maybe she's in the restroom? But no matter how long we waited, she didn't return. I checked the restroom, but she wasn't there. Looking around, there was no sign of her. Finding it strange, my father said with looking troubled,
It's almost time for departure. Where could Olivia be?
Is it time for boarding already? Then let's head over. Although my grandmother must have heard the conversation, she stood up without concern.
Mom, we need to look for Olivia.
She's not here, you know.
What?
Confused, my father tilted his head. I also looked at her. With a malicious smile, she said,
That one's not family. That's why I sent her home. What the hell?
My father was shocked, and then my grandfather said with a laugh,
She's just a housekeeper. This is a family trip, right? A wife without blood ties is a stranger. She's probably doing the fieldwork I ordered by now. What freaking are you saying?
We were just stunned, whereas they were laughing, unconcerned. Not family. What's that about? Mom's not family, then what is she?
What's that? Cut the crap. Olivia is my precious wife. Wife or not, a stranger is a stranger. She's the bad stranger who ensnared our dear son. Right, I never liked her from the start. That's why I disciplined her. A stranger, not working, just squatting in our house, she should at least do some farm work. Let's say, what was it? Right, a neat. Just like a neat.
They were chuckling with a vulgar laugh. I was so furious, and my vision turned red. I was about to say something when my father, quicker than me, stood in front of my grandparents and shouted,
Don't mess with me. Yikes!
My father's voice echoed throughout the space. In the busy and crowded place, his voice resonated surprisingly far. Without caring about other passengers who stopped in their tracks, wondering what was going on, he continued to yell,
Always just harassing Olivia with your petty torments. You think I don't know anything? I know it all.
Yes, I always tattle.
And just when I thought you reflected on that snow incident, you pull this childish stunt. What's so fun about this? Ryan, we were just trying to educate that woman for your sake. What education could you vile people possibly give? It should be you who needs to be educated.
Ryan.
How dare you speak to your parents like that? Dad, you said Olivia was a stranger, right? She is my precious wife. My beloved wife. The most important family to me. You say that my family member, Olivia, is not your family, that she's a stranger. Then I'm a stranger too. You two and I are strangers. Ryan, What are you saying? What am I saying? That's my line. Do you even realize what you're saying, what you're doing? My grandparents' faces got paled at his fury. I had never seen him so angry. It must have been the same for my grandparents. My grandmother looked like she might burst into tears any moment. However, my grandfather gave a wry smile at my father's state. It infuriated me even more to see him laugh it off. Listen, Ryan. Calm down. He seemed to want to somehow control his son, to maintain his dignity as a father. Anyway, we're running out of time. Let's just have Olivia give up this time. And, well, let's just go, just us. The gate close is almost here. And we don't want to waste the cancellation fee for the hotel we booked. What? Wait, what is he even saying? Expecting Mom to give up this time? Whose fault does he think this is? Whose fault do you think this is? My inner thoughts and my father's shout coincidentally overlapped. My grandfather let out a startled yelp. That's enough. If you want to go, then just go on your own. No, you guys were supposed to come too. Oh, I'm not family either, so it's fine. Hannah. As I casually responded, her face showed shock. What? Did she think I would go along with them? As a daughter of a non-family mother, I am not family either. No way! You're family. You have a blood connection. My bond with my mother is stronger. At a loss for words, my grandparents could only snort in response. I turned to my father. Let's go home, Dad. Mom is waiting. Yeah, that's right. I'll call her soon after. Okay, let's do that. Carrying our bags, we headed for the exit, followed by my flustered grandmother. Hey, wait! What about us? What's going to happen to our trip? That's not our problem. Go on your own. And preferably, don't come back. What about the money? If you want to go, pay for it yourselves. No way! Her voice echoed around us. My grandfather stood dumbfounded. Leaving them behind, we headed home, where my mother was waiting. She was seemingly happy, perhaps because we had called from the car, but I didn't miss it. Her eyes were red. There were traces of tears. Those two, I'll never forgive them.
Hey, Dad, I've been thinking.
That's a coincidence, so have I. While hugging my mother, I spoke to my father and sensed him nodding in agreement. That night, my grandparents, having few money for the trip, returned home huffing and puffing. They could have taken a taxi by promising to pay upon arrival or borrowed money from a police station near the station to take the bus. But they didn't even know or understand such things. That's just like them. I guess it served as a good punishment. At first, they were extremely apologetic, but in front of my mother, they began to grow bolder again. We did nothing wrong. That woman is to blame. But my father had enough. That's it. We're finding a new house and moving out. We're cutting ties. I don't care about your old age. He made an unexpected declaration. My grandparents were pale, but his determination didn't waver. He temporarily moved my mother and me to a hotel and hurried to find a new house. He found a good property convenient for his commute and my school. Dad, you are so reliable. Then, on moving day, please, we apologize for everything up to now. Don't abandon us. My grandmother was begging, crying. What are we supposed to do if you two leave us? My grandfather was nearly in tears. I don't care. With a dismissive tone, my father left the grandparents in despair. Olivia, please. We're sorry for everything. We won't do it again. We'll recognize you as family. So let's go back to how things were, okay? Astonishingly, to whom Grandma pleaded was my mother. After all the terrible things they've done, how conveniently self-serving. Feeling disgusted, I saw my mother take my grandmother's hand. With a bright smile on my mother's face, just as her face lit up in response, my mother said, "Judgment from the grand white throne." Huh? Satan sees all the anger in this world. What are you talking about? The day to kneel before Satan is near. You'd better prepare your excuses. I hope you make it to heaven. Wait, hey, wait. Goodbye. Leaving the speechless grandparents behind, we got into the car. As we drove away from their house, I glanced back once to see them standing there, dumbfounded. They were getting further and further away, and I realized that might be the last time I see them. Inside the car, heading to a new beginning, as I chuckled at the passing scenery, my mother looked at me curiously.
What's up?
Well, just feeling a bit envious.
Of what?
Of Dad. He said, my precious wife, my beloved spouse, the most important family member to me.
Really?
Hannah!
What are you spilling?
Oh my, still so lovey-dovey after all these years. Really makes one envious.
Come on, no kidding.
My mother, blushing, lightly tapped my head. It didn't hurt, but I pretended it did and rubbed my head, then added, I wish I could have a boyfriend like Dad soon. Right after that.
A boyfriend?
His pained cry echoed through the car, holding the steering wheel. Hey, mister. I'm the daughter of this company's owner, all right? My dad's the boss. Don't lump me with these lowly, poor employees. Surprised by both her vulgarity and her true identity, my dad paused with a shocked expression, then cleared his throat softly. Meanwhile, Carol wore a smug look, as if she had just made a grand statement. Remembering that Dad originally came to our company for business, I realized we couldn't afford to cause any more trouble. So I tried to apologize to Carol. Just then, Dad spoke in a low voice. So, the lower ranks are the poor employees, huh? Maybe it's time to revise the salary structure. He muttered this almost to himself.
What? Are you mocking me? Fine. Mister, what's your name? Which subcontractor do you work for? I'll tell Dad about you. It might just be your fault if the company goes under.
Carol retorted. Dad, looking slightly puzzled, thought for a moment before breaking into a smile. Then, let's go say hello to the boss. Lenore and the others, come along. Everyone except Dad looked shocked, but he walked ahead. Not wanting to be left behind, we hurried after him. My name is Lenore. I'm a hardworking 28-year-old. The company I work for is quite large, and I work tirelessly every day. My dad, concerned about me, contacts me once a week, but I always reply with, "Don't worry," trying to reassure him, almost forcibly. His concern is probably because he wants to recruit me to his company. 7 years ago, when I was still a college student, I was busy with job hunting every day to secure a job offer. Dad, who runs his own company, once invited me to join his company, saying, "Why bother with job hunting? You can just come work for my company." It's not that I didn't want to go to his company, but I didn't want to rely on such connections. I wanted to succeed on my own merit. And I wanted to work alongside him, as an equal, once I was fully competent at my job. I explained this and persuaded him. Reluctantly, he agreed, and I joined my current company. It's been 6 years since I started working here. Now, I have more responsibilities, and I even have subordinates. And it's our busy season. It's not uncommon for our department heads to be absent from the office for an entire day during this time, and sometimes I can't even sit at my desk for more than 30 minutes. We're that busy. I don't have the luxury of constantly worrying about Dad's feelings. Today, I've been bustling around the office since morning. Even amidst the rush, a shrill voice caught my ear as I passed by a meeting room, prompting me to stop. The door was slightly ajar, and peering inside, I saw a woman with a tray bowing her head before another woman who sat arrogantly, berating her.
How many times do I have to tell you? I don't like coffee, I want Coke.
It seemed the employee had brought the wrong beverage. The angry woman looked younger than me, but whose guest was she? A frequent complainer, perhaps? It's disgraceful to fuss over complimentary beverages. I wondered what her parents would think. Just as I was about to open the door and intervene. Ah, there she goes again. I heard a voice behind me. Turning around, I saw my colleague Sissy peeking into the room.
You scared me. Don't just start talking out of nowhere.
I chided her in a whisper, careful not to be overheard.
Sorry, but it's unexpected to see you peeking, Lenore,
she said with a mischievous grin. Sissy is only a year younger than me, even though she's my subordinate. We get along well and often go out for drinks. Professionally, she's my subordinate, but in our private lives, we're like friends.
I wasn't peeking. By the way, Sissy, do you know who that woman is?
I asked.
Oh, she's quite notorious around here,
Sissy replied with a slight smirk.
That's Carol, the boss's only daughter. His daughter? But why is she here? I inquired, puzzled.
She occasionally comes to play around like this, throwing her weight around with the staff. No one dares to contradict her because she's the boss's daughter. As Sissy explained, Carol continued to berate the employee.
Go buy me a Coke. What's your name? I'll tell Dad,
she shouted. I want to help that employee, my colleague, but I hesitated.
Let's get back to work for now, Lenore,
Sissy suggested. Poor thing, we don't keep Coke for guests. Sissy gently closed the meeting room door, holding the handle that I was gripping. She enjoys bossing the staff around like this. She never actually reports anyone. Last week, it was ginger ale. You have work to do, Lenore. She's not worth your time. Her words reminded me of the tasks I had to complete.
Sissy, are you free now? Want to come to the warehouse with me? Sure. I was actually looking for you. I have some business there too.
We left the meeting room, the shouts still echoing, with heavy hearts. Why does Carol come here to play? She should be having fun with friends. She looks college-aged. I pondered aloud while checking inventory in the warehouse.
Apparently, she's joining the company next year. She's been visiting frequently for that. You'd think she'd rather be with friends, but she doesn't seem to have many,
Sissy commented.
True.
I mused, feeling uneasy about Carol. Shouldn't she value the employees who support her family's business? Especially since they'll be her coworkers and supervisors next year? It's not right to treat them as mere playthings. Does she not realize she's embarrassing her parents? As I pondered these things, the pressure of my pen on the inventory notes inadvertently grew stronger. Noticing this, Sissy glanced at my notes. I get why you're angry, Lenore. She's exactly the type of person you dislike the most, she said with a wry smile. That's true, but what really irks me is the boss and the executives who say nothing. They should reprimand her for such behavior.
Apparently, she's an overindulged child, born late in her father's life,
Sissy explained with a gentle smile, easing me back into work mode. Thanks to her, I managed to finish the warehouse work surprisingly quickly. Exhausted from the day, I was heading home when my mobile phone rang. It was a message from Dad. Lenore, I'm coming to your company tomorrow for a business deal. If you're free, I'd like to see you. I was surprised. Dad was visiting my office? The company I work for is in the same industry as his company, and I knew they were connected, but it was the first time he had shown his face at my company in the 6 years I've been working there. I hoped to see him, but it really depended on timing, so I just replied, "If I'm free, I'll come and see you. Let me know." And then closed the message. The next day, my office was busy, but things started to calm down by lunchtime. While eating, I received a message from Dad. "I'll be at your company soon." I checked the time and decided to wait for him outside. As I got up, Sissy, sitting next to me, asked,
"Where are you rushing off to, Lenore? It's still lunch break."
"Oh, my dad is visiting the office today. I thought I'd go say hi since it's been a while."
"What? Can I come too, just to greet him?"
she asked excitedly. "Sure, let's go together," I agreed. Sissy followed me, checking her reflection in the window and fixing her hair. I was pleased to have such an eager subordinate. While Sissy and I waited for my dad at the entrance.
"Is that him?"
She suddenly pointed to a taxi. I shook my head, Steve would have driven his own car rather than take a taxi. As we looked in the opposite direction, a shrill voice called out,
"Nice of you to meet me here."
I pretended not to hear, but Sissy made a disgusted face as if to say this is the worst.
"Hey, you over there, where are you looking? I'm right here."
I turned around, frustrated. And there was Carol. She was dressed inappropriately for the office, in a flouncy miniskirt and casual t-shirt, clacking her heels as she walked towards us.
"Excuse me, but you're mistaken. We're waiting for someone else here," I said, looking away again.
In an ear-piercing tone, Carol shouted,
"What's with that attitude? Aren't you an employee here? Apologize right now."
Sissy looked at me with a panicked expression. "Yes, I'm an employee."
"But why should I apologize?"
I responded calmly.
"What?"
Carol seemed even more incensed by this.
"You, a lowly employee, think you can talk to me like that? Really, old lady?"
Well, a company needs its lowly employees, doesn't it?
And for your information, I'm only 28, not an old lady.
Carol burst into laughter at my reply.
28? You look much older. Is it hard being poor? I pity you,"
she said, pointing at me mockingly. I was furious, but I couldn't do much since she was the boss's daughter. I had to stand there, seething in silence, as she laughed. Then,
"Hey, Lenore! Long time no see!"
I heard a voice from afar. Approaching us was Dad, a slightly overweight, ordinary-looking man in a suit, waving his hand.
"Who's that weird guy? Hilarious,"
Carol said, looking at him and laughing. That was the last straw for me.
"Excuse me, that's rude."
I raised my voice.
"What? Who are you yelling at?"
Carol yelled back. "What's going on? Are you all friends?" Unaware of the situation, Dad smiled at me kindly.
"What? As if I would be friends with these people."
Carol snapped at him, switching her target from me to him. Dad's expression changed immediately.
"How rude to say these people when you are colleagues who work together."
He was right, but Carol wasn't convinced.
"Listen, old man. I'm the daughter of this company's owner. My dad is the boss. Don't lump me with these lowly, poor employees."
Dad looked shocked by Carol's rudeness and her identity, then cleared his throat softly. Meanwhile, Carol looked smug, as if she had just triumphed. Remembering that Dad originally came to our company for business, I realized we couldn't afford to cause any more trouble. So I tried to apologize to Carol. But at that moment, Dad spoke in a low voice.
"So, the lower ranks are the poor employees, huh? Maybe it's time to revise the salary structure."
He muttered this to himself.
"What? Are you mocking me? Fine. Mister, what's your name? Which subcontracting company are you from? I'll tell my dad about you. You might just ruin the company."
Carol spat out. Dad, looking puzzled, thought for a moment before smiling. "Well then, let's go greet the boss. Lenore and the others, come along." The only one unfazed by the situation was Dad, who had already started walking ahead. Not wanting to be left behind, we quickly followed him. We reached the boss's office, and Dad entered first. Sissy and I followed, tense. Carol, pushing past us, rushed to her father.
"Dad! This man, he..."
She began to tattle immediately. Before Carol could finish, her father spoke loudly.
"This man? Who are you talking to?"
"I'm sorry, Steve.
My daughter lacks manners."
He shot Carol a sharp look to silence her, then turned to us with a smile.
"Ah, it's your daughter with you today?"
"Did you know about me?" I asked, surprised. Dad sat down on a sofa.
"Wait, Dad."
Carol protested. Dad gave me a kind look, then turned his sharp gaze to the boss.
"Earlier, your daughter called my daughter and her colleague lowly, poor employees."
"What's this about?" The boss's face tightened.
Well, they deserved it. They were rude to me, just low-end employees.
Carol continued in her shrill voice.
What?
The boss turned pale and shouted angrily at Carol.
What are you saying? This lady is the daughter of a valued client, and this man is her father and the current boss. Eh?
Carol's face turned pale, realizing the gravity of her actions. To think such a large company still treats its employees as poor. You've become quite the boss, haven't you? If your employees are poor, shouldn't the company be ashamed? The boss was sweating profusely. I can't leave my daughter in such a place. She'll resign today. When the boss heard that, he immediately apologized to my dad and said,
I'm terribly sorry. I've heard your daughter is very skilled. Please, not resignation. And you, apologize to him.
Wait, Dad. What's going on?
I whispered to him.
I had let the boss know that you were employed here, to look out for you. As I knew that you don't like the preferential treatment, I told him just to keep an eye out.
Ignoring the boss and his daughter, Steve explained kindly.
But I never thought this company would treat its employees like slaves. Lenore, you can quit now. You've done well here for 6 years. Come work for me.
That's sudden. I can't just leave in the middle of the busy season. I protested. Dad seemed a bit exasperated by my response, but he eventually agreed. All right, if you insist. After this busy season, come work for my company. And you, it must be uncomfortable staying here after this. What do you say? The industry is the same. He kindly offered this to Sissy.
Yes, absolutely.
Sissy replied immediately.
Wait, Sissy. I haven't decided yet.
I protested. Sissy looked at me quizzically. Why not? Your dad's company is one of the elite in the country, and you're his daughter. Why wouldn't you go? Dad nodded in agreement with Sissy's words.
I don't want to join his company just because of connections. I know Dad's company is big, but I didn't want to take the easy way.
I explained. Sissy smiled happily. That's so like you, Lenore. And she continued.
Lenore's father, I'm Sissy. I really appreciate that I can work with her. She is an outstanding boss.
As she praised me, Dad smiled and sobbed along. I felt embarrassed and urged Dad to continue.
Dad, the boss is still.
Ah, right, forgot about that. Sorry, Sissy, we'll talk later.
Yes.
Sissy cheerfully replied.
Now, boss, no need to apologize anymore. Let's end our business dealings here.
As my dad finally addressed to him, he was surprised and looked up at Dad.
That would be a great loss for us. I'm truly sorry. No, it's fine. This isn't because of the disrespectful behavior towards them. Then why?
He asked.
Please guide me. I'll improve anything. I'll definitely make improvements.
The company would suffer a huge blow if they lost their dealings with Dad. That's why the boss kept apologizing repeatedly. Improvement is impossible. Once trust is lost, it can't be regained. You say employees are your priority, yet your daughter treats them like slaves. Did you think I wouldn't hear about it?
I'm not sure.
Even from the side, I can see Carol turned pale. I could demote you from the boss, but should I? Dad asked.
Please, forgive me.
The boss pleaded.
Hey, Dad. Just because you're a valued client, you can't really do that, can you?
I asked.
I can.
Dad replied with a smile, indicating he really had the power. I don't inquire deeply into the relationship between the boss and Dad, but Dad might be more powerful in this industry than I thought. With this realization, the both attitudes of my dad and the boss make sense.
I won't go that far since I'm not a child, but I will end our contract. Thank you for your business.
With that, he stood up, straightening his suit.
Please, I'm begging you.
just for this term, please reconsider. How about a promotion for your daughter? No, a raise. She can even become an executive right now. Dad! But you said I would start from manager because of how it looks to others. An immediate promotion to executive is impossible.
At that moment, my dad's look at the two changed to one of disdain. And the boss's pleading eyes were fixed squarely on Carol. Despite this, Carol still seemed dissatisfied with the difference between what her father had said about my position and her own treatment. I almost felt sorry for the boss with such an oblivious daughter. But I had reached my limit and couldn't hold back anymore.
You plan to put a woman who called us lowly, poor employees and was rude to Dad in a position of authority?
I blurted out.
Well, my daughter doesn't understand because she hasn't experienced the real world yet. She'll learn to respect others through the hardships of society.
Respecting others has nothing to do with social experience. I interjected, louder than I intended. Carol looked up, startled, and I addressed her.
A company cannot function without its employees. Even someone who has never been an executive, like me, understands this. But you don't. Why? How would I know that?
Carol seemed genuinely clueless.
Do you think being a daughter of privilege puts you above others? Of course. I'm from a different upbringing. It's not my decision, it's God's.
To Carol's nonsensical reply, I forced a smile.
Then, as the daughter of this company's boss, I'm higher than you, right? You'll listen to me?
My smile was apparently so frightening that Sissy later told me it scared Carol, whose composure vanished.
Fine, what do you want? This company is not your playground. If you want to play, go find your college friends.
Carol hung her head in shame, her face flushed. Sissy quietly applauded me.
Well said. That's my daughter.
Dad laughed heartily. After that, Sissy and I spent a hectic month at work. But the second half of the busy season was unexpectedly calm. Each time our supervisors and colleagues looked puzzled, Sissy and I exchanged knowing smiles. A month later, Sissy and I resigned and joined my dad's company. Our previous company began to decline drastically. Rumors quickly spread that the abrupt termination of the contract with a major firm was to blame, prompting other companies to reconsider their dealings. Sales plummeted by 40%, most employees started job hunting, and the company's decline accelerated. The general meeting decided the crisis was due to the boss's fault, and he was ousted. His brother is now trying to rebuild the company. According to Dad, this brother is well respected. The company might be reborn into something better. On the condition that the former boss's family no longer be involved, Dad began moves to restart dealings with them. I also heard from Dad that the former boss's family began to lose their possessions, eventually selling their house. I don't know where they went, but I doubt a family accustomed to such wealth could adapt to normal life. In fact, Carol reportedly got a job at a grocery store, acted arrogantly to customers, got into an argument, and was fired within hours, becoming somewhat of a legend. In my personal life, I managed to convince Dad to let me start as a regular employee instead of directly becoming an executive. However, I'm aware that I'll eventually take over the company. So, I balance my everyday tasks with assisting the executive team. Constantly amazed by their innovative ideas that never occur to me, sometimes feeling overwhelmed. But every time I feel like my head is about to explode, Sissy is there by my side, saying,
Lenore, let's finish this task first. Then we can decide the priority for the next ones.
Her support keeps me grounded. Sometimes the pressure of being the boss's daughter feels crushing, but with Sissy around, I can stay confident and cope. Interestingly, Dad also likes Sissy, and sometimes the three of us go out for drinks. Every time Dad gets tipsy and tells this joke.
Lenore will be the next president, and Sissy the next executive officer. Don't even think about getting married and retiring, you too.
He often tells this story laughingly. However, what Dad doesn't know is that I'm secretly in a relationship. My desire to get married is still a secret from Dad.